Ask Mike, brought to you by the Stadium Shop on Razorback in Fayetteville.
Happy Monday, everybody. It is Monday, and that means it's another edition of Ask Mike. Mike Irwin here joining
the August Camp edition, right?
I love that, the August Camp edition. It is, and we have a lot of football questions to get to, so we're going to jump right into it today. Our first question is from Snout Team, who says, I hear lots of people saying you can't compare Haselwood to Burks. Burks was a generational talent, but if Haselwood was the '1 wide receiver in the nation and had a 9.965 rating, and Burks was the 16th wide receiver in the nation with a 9.544 rating, why wouldn't we compare them?
Okay, I think if you talk to most fans that follow recruiting, and they do on these message boards a lot, they're going to say, oh, it's a simple answer. Haselwood was overrated coming out of high school, and Burks was underrated. And maybe that's true. I don't know. Certainly one has achieved a lot more than the other. But Jimmy Smith was Haselwood's high school coach.
Yeah.
And on Saturday, he had an interesting take on this. He said, if you talk to Haselwood, it's not that he was overrated. His rating was fine coming out of high school. At Oklahoma, he didn't deliver. He didn't play like that. And he believes that now that he's at Arkansas, he will be that #1 wide receiver that he was when he came out of high school. So I like his take on that. They talked a lot. Some of the players talked about how different he's been as a transfer. A lot of the guys that come in the portal, especially if they come in right before the spring, they'll be kind of quiet. They're trying to learn the lay of the land, get to know their teammates, get to know the coaches. They don't say a lot at first. You're settling into your environment. And I think it might have been one of the running backs. Which one was it? I'm trying to remember who said this. But he said, I think it was A.J. Green.
I think it was A.J. Green, yeah.
He said, from the first day he got here, he was a leader. He's a senior, and he acted like a senior, and he acted like he'd been here all along. And he said now, this summer, it was even more apparent that he's taken a leadership role on the offensive side right alongside K.J. Jefferson. So, you know, you put all that together and you really look at a guy that's got a lot to prove, knows he's got a lot to prove, but is not coming in here sort of like, well, I transferred, I'll see what I can do. He's confident. So I like his attitude. I hope he performs like the #1 wide receiver in the country.
I know Hog fans definitely want him to be that for this team. Armand Abbey says Arkansas's defensive tackle commit out of Georgia. The kid's a monster at 6'6", 350 pounds. He's listed as a 3-star, and Auburn was the only other SEC school that offered. Is it because he's too slow for the position?
I think his name is Ian Gefford, something like that. It's hard. It's a strange spelling. No, excuse me, if you go look at his highlight video, he's not slow, even though he weighs 350. In fact, he kind of blows up quarterbacks. He just busts through the middle and grabs them before they can even move. Now, Arkansas coaches are loving the fact that they were able to get a commitment from him, and I think they're hoping that it holds on, because Otis feels like that he's going to get other offers, that his recruiting is going to blow up. He said that one of the reasons he was a 3-star and didn't get a lot of attention was because he didn't go to a lot of these camps. And there was that guy, Connor Stroh, whoever he was, that was an O-line guy that, remember, he was at every school and everybody, he was interested in all schools and went to all camps and all this stuff, and he was blowing up in recruiting. Well, this kid didn't do that stuff. But Otis thinks that once they start seeing what he's doing this year, that he'll get other offers and he might move up to a 4-star. But they like him, Arkansas's coaches like him, because they're comparing him to John Ridgeway, who was just kind of like that tank in the middle that you couldn't run past, but also he was so quick that he could get back into the backfield and sack quarterbacks too. And that's what this kid looks like. He's just a bigger version of John Ridgeway. I'm telling you, if you look at his highlights, he just throws the center out of the way and boom, he explodes into the backfield and the quarterback takes a snap and he's just down. It's like, where'd this guy come from? So I'm pretty excited about this kid after looking at his video.
Oh, yeah, you're getting all of us excited.
And instead of Ridgeway, who they had for 1 year, they could have this kid for 3 years.
Oh,
so
that'd
that's
be great.
Pretty exciting.
Oh, that is definitely exciting. Ryan Spears says, I think I read something about Jefferson saying he was planning on losing 5 pounds before the season. Unless the coaching staff wants him to lose weight, he looks fine to me. I think keeping him healthy is paramount.
Well, he's actually lost a few pounds, and he says he's going to lose more. Now, if you're concerned about, oh, he's going to get hurt, he's going to be too small and all this stuff, it's not really noticeable.
Yeah.
Maybe you notice it a little bit, but he still looks more like a linebacker than a quarterback to me. I don't think he's going to have any problem running over people like he's done in the past. He maybe is just a little bit quicker than he has been. And if that's the case, that's better, right? That's not a bad thing. What I've noticed, and you were over there on Sunday watching them, he's just throwing the ball really well. He's got good quickness. He knows what he's doing. I've been impressed with KJ in the press conferences.
Me too.
You're the quarterback. You've got to be the team leader in that room when you have to go into press conferences. He was a little bit quiet last year. He's saying more this year. He looks like the guy that's in charge. He kind of gives you a little bit of confidence. I think as a fan, if you look at what he's saying, I can see where a fan would go, yeah, that's cool, all right. And for our standpoint, somebody in the media, he's not talking in platitudes. It's not just this typical stuff that some athletes sometimes say. What he says actually means stuff. He actually reveals some things. So I've just been impressed with everything about him, and I certainly wouldn't worry about him losing a few pounds like he's suddenly going to get hurt.
Yeah, and I think his confidence level, I think you mentioned it, he sounds more confident in what he's saying. It really looks good to have your main guy, your quarterback, speaking with so much confidence at these things.
Absolutely. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah, for sure. I've noticed it too. Lanny says a current Hogville poll asked win or lose for every team on Arkansas's schedule this season. Hogville members give Arkansas a 50-50 chance or better to beat every team they play except for Alabama. The number on that game, is 20%. Clearly, the tide is in the heads of Razorback football fans.
And I would say for good reason. When you have never beaten a Nick Saban coached team at Alabama, it's never happened. I think Hog fans are pretty savvy. I've liked them for a long time, especially on social media, because, you know, they know what they see. And you might, as a fan, you might be saying right now, well, look, we almost beat those guys in Tuscaloosa last year. We'll be better this year. Yeah, this is the year we're going to beat them. And I think a lot of these fans in this poll, especially Hogville, which these are more plugged-in fans, they're going, nah, I'll see it when I believe it. So I don't think that's a bad thing, what the results of that for Alabama. But I'd like to take a look at that poll because I think it's a really interesting poll. Now let's take a look at this. This is how Hogville members voted, how they think each game on Arkansas' schedule will turn out. So let's start off. 95% of those polled think Arkansas will win the season opener against Cincinnati. I think that's a really high number. Shows a lot of confidence. And 94% see South Carolina as a win. 98% believe that Bobby Petrino will go down in his return to Fayetteville. And slightly over half think Arkansas will extend its winning streak to 2 games over the Aggies. And then there's that Alabama number. That's a little bit surprising maybe since, as I said before, Arkansas was a close game. But come on, it's in Fayetteville this year. I think Arkansas has a better chance, but I don't really have a problem with that 22% number. It seems logical to me. Now, Mississippi State, perhaps some respect for Mike Leach. I don't know, 67%. It's not 90%. Predict a Hog win. BYU, pretty much the same thing, 66%. Think that Arkansas comes back from Provo with a win. Arkansas fans pretty confident about beating a team this year that has had their number for several years now. That's Auburn, 82%. That's a little bit surprising.
Yeah.
And then Hugh Freeze, he's getting no respect. Look at that number. And then almost 80% of Arkansas fans think Arkansas will take down LSU. That's a little bit surprising. That's kind of a bold pick. Ole Miss, not much respect for Lane Kiffin coming to Fayetteville in year 3. And then look at Dinky Dinkowitz. Arkansas fans say
97%.
They're going to go down in Columbia. So it's an interesting poll. And if you look at the sum total of it, the majority of fans on that poll think that Arkansas will go 11-1, which is like a little. You start thinking the Alabama thing is negative, but then a majority of people who voted in that poll think Arkansas. I mean, Arkansas's picked to win every one of those games, even the A&M game, except Alabama. So I thought it was an interesting poll.
Definitely interesting. That was on Hogville this week?
Yes.
Can people still vote on that, or is that being closed
I'm
now?
sure they can, and the numbers have probably changed a little bit. Those were the numbers as of yesterday.
As of yesterday.
But I don't think it's going to change dramatically.
Gotcha. Arky Redneck asked, does ESPN have something against Arkansas? I saw on Twitter that it's been almost 16 years since ESPN Gameday came to Fayetteville. Every SEC team has been the host site since then, several times. That really does need to change.
On the surface, yeah, you'd say this is another one of those ESPN doesn't like Arkansas. Razorback fans think that the SEC network is biased against them. ESPN doesn't like them, whatever. Here's the thing about a game day, and you got to really think about this. Theoretically, ESPN Game Day goes to what the ESPN people think is going to be the #1 most interesting game that week. And that's not generally Arkansas. It's just not. Well, you may think that as a Razorback fan, but you're talking national biggest game of the week. And some of this over the years has been the program has been down, but then you had those Bobby Petrino years. And I went back and looked, and in 2010, Alabama came here. That was a game that it's still the loudest game I've ever seen at Reynolds Razorback Stadium, and Arkansas had them down early. That might have been a game that ESPN would have come in and done a game day, but they didn't. But there are some other factors. You know, now that Arkansas is better, obviously it increases the chances. You could look, say, if Arkansas is undefeated this year and Alabama's undefeated and they come here, maybe ESPN Game Day comes here this year. But there are some other factors, and I got to be honest. The #1 factor, and we go over and tailgate and do our game day show as of around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock on Saturday mornings. Now, I don't do that anymore. They've got me back in the studio for the last 3 or 4 years, but I did it a lot. And when you're out there at the stadium at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and you realize that Arkansas fans don't show up that early, they just don't. And even looking back at that one game day show they had, it was all right, but it's not the overwhelming crowd you see in some places. And I don't know, but what ESPN has figured out, maybe through word of mouth, that Arkansas fans don't tend to show up at 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning to be a big factor on that game day show. Now, if they had a game day, I think word would spread and there'd be more people there. But I'm just saying Arkansas may have a reputation of, it's my view that Razorback fans show up late for everything. They do. In baseball, basketball, they're always coming in late. What about Bud Walton Arena? You'll be inside that place, and it'll be half full with about 5 minutes till the game starts, and all of a sudden, boom, it's full. And people are coming in 5 minutes after the game starts. So Razorback fans are kind of late arriving bunch. So maybe that's a factor.
They're fashionably late, Mike.
Yeah,
they're fashionably late.
Maybe that's a factor. And I also think maybe TV market size figures into that. You know, Arkansas, I haven't looked at any numbers lately, but it would either be Arkansas or, say, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, the two smallest footprints statewide-wise in TV market, number of TV household homes in the state. I think either Arkansas or Mississippi would be the lowest number. And so I think sometimes, especially with the SEC network, that factors into what they do because they know you have fewer people watching.
It definitely does.
Here's the problem with that number. All that tells you is the number of homes out there. It doesn't tell you who's actually watching. So you could have a lot more TV homes in a state like Georgia, for instance, because Atlanta is a big major market. That doesn't mean they're always watching on ESPN, ESPN Game Day or anything else like that, SEC Network. More Razorback fans, I think, probably percentage-wise would watch, but there's no way for ESPN to talk about that number or even get it. You just don't know what it is. So I think Arkansas has got several things they'd have to overcome, but more than anything else, if you win consistently, if you're winning 9 and 10 games over 5-6 years, then I think you're going to see it. But I think that's what you have to overcome, You can't just have one good season and then drop back a little bit and have another one. There's got to be some consistency.
And the other thing is how much you drum up on social media and how much people get hyped for the game on those, because ESPN does watch that as well.
They look at that too. They do.
So I know a lot of people have been talking about Cincinnati and Arkansas meeting for that first game of the season. Well, ESPN obviously saw all of that and said, you know what, we need to bring some love over to Fayetteville. So.
And we've had several SEC game days here, but what do you see? What I see is there's not a lot of people out there.
I know. I have.
It's because it's early, and they're not going to go out there that early on a football Saturday. There's not.
And you got to make the signs, people, too. You got to make those signs as well. Well, T.L. Slayton says, why does everybody freak out over August camp? Every year it's hype, hype, hype. And then the season starts and everything changes. As some of you in the media got held accountable for the things you said in August, you'd be fired before the season is over.
That's true of TV now, on anything, news, sports, I don't care what you're talking about. Honestly, when I started in this business in early 70s, you couldn't be really wrong about something. If it happened to you more than one or two times, they'd get rid of you because you weren't viewed as having any credibility with the fans. That's out the window these days. You can say pretty much anything and it's forgotten the next day. Now, I will defend the local media a little bit. I don't think we're anywhere close to being Homer type during August camp, as I see, for instance, with the Aggies. You want to talk about go read what they post about August camp. Everything is a sign that they're going to beat Alabama this year.
They're winning the national championship.
Some little thing happens in practice, and all of a sudden, hey, this is significant. If you look at what gets said by us about those practices, first of all, we're only there for 20 minutes, sometimes 15, maybe occasionally 25. So we don't see everything. So you're invariably going to have to talk about some things that they talk about after it's over. Mm-hmm. You know, remember that first day there was they were doing a 2-minute offense, and Hudson Clark jumped up and picked off.
Well, I wasn't there the first day.
Well, they were talking about it afterward.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
And I think it was Jalen Catalon that mentioned it, and Sam Pittman mentioned it, and then KJ Jefferson talked about it. I made a mistake. I got greedy. I thought the pass was there. He jumped the route and picked it, and it ended. That was the whole deal about it. It was Pittman was talking about how what you have to do to go from 9 wins to 10 wins is you're winning close games. You got to win the close games. And how do you win close games? You have to do little things to win close games. And one of those little things is you get down to the end, you're down 6 points or 5 points or whatever. You got to score. Yeah. You don't, you lose the game. So that was that drill. It's a 2-minute offense. You're down. You got to score. If you score, we win the game. If you don't score, the defense wins the game. That was the scenario. And KJ thought it was there and threw it to Haselwood, and it got picked. It was interesting that Catalon then came back and defended that pass. He said, I was back there. He said, if I had been a quarterback, I would have thrown that pass. He looked open. It was just a great job by our guy. So that stuff gets reported by us through them. We didn't see it.
Right.
But are you kidding me? Fans don't want to know that? And then as we were leaving yesterday, our period is up, but what do? You walk very slowly out there because you want to watch as much as possible, because what happens is
slow walk.
When our time is up, that's when they start doing ones versus ones. So you're walking very slowly and you're watching what's happening. And as I walked by that end zone on the grass field, I saw Catalon all over Haselwood, and I thought, man, he's not going to catch this pass. And it was weird. All of a sudden, I saw Haselwood with the ball, and I'm like, how did he get that ball? And so it was a great pass, a great catch, under great coverage. Again, that's something we can see and pass along. So what am I supposed to do? Say, well, I better not mention that because it might blow smoke. Somebody might start thinking Haselwood's really good when he's not. All you can do is report what you see or what they tell you happened. Doesn't mean your coverage is bad or you're trying to, pump things up a little bit. And I would also say in the final analysis, if you walk over there negative, that's not doing your job. I think you sort of walk over there with a positive attitude, look for positive things, and then if you see the negative, you report it.
Exactly.
So I understand what he's saying, but on the other hand, why do people make such a big deal out of August camp? Because it's not the season yet. It's the closest thing you've got.
And
so,
it's exciting. It means that football is so close,
yeah.
right?
And some fans don't. Some fans pay no attention to this till the game's played. That's fine. Others are just overly, I got to have a fix. I got to have some information. What happened today? Tell me what went on out there today. So it's just the way it always is and always has been.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good analysis of that. Wizard of Hogs says you need to get the term pods out of your head. It has long since been replaced by a permanent opponents model. With three permanent opponents, Arkansas may play Texas, OU, and Mizzou each season, but that doesn't mean those other three teams also play each other every year.
Yeah, he's responding to something that I talked about last week, which was that Jimbo Fisher sort of revealed who he thinks their opponents are. And then I was like saying, if it was a pod system, then you would break up the Egg Bowl and you would break up the Texas-Oklahoma rivalry. Now, I wasn't saying that was written in stone. I have no idea. They have made no official announcement of how they're going to do this. The pod thing was mentioned early on. There's no question that the permanent opponent's idea is a better idea. It's more flexible. But I just want to say, and they will never do what I want. I'm admitting to you this right now, but I'll say this again. I don't favor either one of those systems.
Right.
I favored taking the 16 teams, dividing them into East and West, just like we have now, and you play every single team in the 7 teams in your 8-team division. You all play them, and those are the only games that count on your division's standings. Then, if you want to play rotator games and cross over, if you're Arkansas and you want to cross over and play Alabama or Georgia or whatever, you've played them. But it shouldn't count, because the biggest problem with all these rotators and what he's talking about, and even the pod system, either one of those, you've got 5 rotating games for every year. So you're playing 3 permanent opponents and 5 rotators. There's no way to make that fair. You're going to end up with what we've seen the last 2 years with Arkansas, where Arkansas is playing the toughest schedule in the country. It won't always be Arkansas, but every year, if you're a fan and you do this system, here's what you're going to do. The schedule's going to come out, and you're going to look at it, and you're either going to go, that's great, or this is terrible, we're screwed. Because what happens if you're an SEC team and you're going to have to play Georgia, Alabama, and LSU all in 1 year, and some other team doesn't play any of those teams? Right. And that can happen with these rotators. So I hate rotators. I don't mind playing a rotating schedule. Just don't count it in your final division standings. And then if you have the best record in your division, you still cross over and play the team with the best record in the other division for the SEC championship game. But you don't make it unfair, because one team's had a much tougher schedule than the other.
Yeah, I've said this before.
They've all played the same teams.
Exactly. I've said this before to you, Mike, but I actually like that system, and I hope the SEC is listening. I know they won't, but that actually does make sense, and is actually a really good system. But Team Otis wants to know, what do you think of Rocket?
You know, I was watching him yesterday, and I was thinking to myself, it's hard to imagine that just about a year and a half ago he was a wide receiver. I remember when they first started talking in the spring last year, hey, this guy was a wide receiver, but we're going to try him out at running back. And he was looking really good. I mean, it's hard for a guy to make a transition that fast. I think he was like duck to water. The minute he became a running back, it was like you thought he had been a running back all along.
Yeah.
And he had that really good year last year, but now he's bigger, hasn't lost any of his speed and quickness. And if you look at the 3 guys that I think are going to get snaps this year, he's kind of a combination of the other 2. He's got Dominic Johnson's size and power, and he's got A.J. Green's speed, and he's got it all wrapped up into one package. No wonder he's the #1 guy, and they're talking about he's going to get a lot of the reps because he's looking really good. Now, I don't want to jinx him, but I feel really good about that running back room. They got 3 guys each with different skill sets, one of them kind of a combination of the other 2. And again, the transition he's made in just a little over a year from wide receiver, what I find myself asking now is, why the heck was he ever a wide receiver?
That's what
who
I'm
came up with that
asking,
bird
too.
brain idea?
I don't know. Maybe someone in high school, maybe not. But definitely that running back room is going to be one to watch out for this season. Mousetown says, I use Twitter to keep up with Razorback sports a lot more than Facebook these days. It's mostly great, but I spend too much time having to block jerk fans of other SEC schools. Could you give me your list of the most annoying SEC fan bases, also the best?
All right, now keep in mind, he's talking about Twitter.
Yeah.
Specifically, how people, those of us that are on Twitter, you are, I am, most of us are, and I will agree with him. I use Twitter more for sports. I use Facebook. What I do use Facebook for is to go look at how Razorback fans are reacting to what's going on. But just for general information that you're getting, I'm on Twitter. So how do I react to the Twitter fans that I see around the SEC on Twitter? You got to keep that in mind. It's not at games or anything like that. It's not out in public. It's just what I'm reading when I log on to Twitter 5 or 6 times a day. So I will say right off the bat, I'm going to go with A&M again. And it's for a lot of the reasons that I've talked about. These guys are delusional. They do the same thing on Twitter that they do everywhere else. They're always about to win the national championship.
Always.
And we talked about this before. Every time something happens in practice, they somehow, what'll happen is the Homer Aggie media will post this thing, and then their fans will read it, and then they'll retweet it. And so-and-so did this at practice today. Just one more reason why we're going to beat Alabama this year and win the SEC West. And then when we do that, we're going to beat Georgia, and we're going to the national championship game. So
love it.
This is what you run into with A&M fans. Now, Tennessee. Again, this is Tennessee fans on Twitter. Here's the thing about Tennessee. They sort of do the same sort of thing that the Aggies fans do, at least this year. Maybe not so much in the past. But, yeah, boy, they're good this year. This is the year they're going to beat Georgia. This is the year because it's all coming together for them. They're going to beat Georgia. They're going to go to the SEC championship game. They're going to get into the playoffs. They're going to win. This is when Tennessee football comes back. But the thing that they add is A&M fans never acknowledge what happened last year if it's bad. It just didn't happen. They just don't talk about it. Tennessee fans make excuses for it. It's like, well, this happened last year, but that wasn't our fault, and this happened, and blah, blah. And so they're always looking back and saying, don't pay any attention to the fact that we think we're good now when we were bad last year, because there was a reason why we were bad, whereas A&M fans never refer to that whatsoever.
Yeah, and Tennessee also has really crazy baseball fans on Twitter, too. Yeah. They're psychotic, so
they're not so.
No.
And then LSU. LSU fans are more, what annoys me about them is they're just really aggressive. They get angry really fast.
I've noticed that.
And if they get challenged by anybody, it's like, they're going to come after you, you know. I guess there's something down there in the swamp that just gets you going. I don't know. But those are the 3 most annoying. Now let's go to the good
ones, yeah.
The good ones on Twitter. And if we look at that, we're going to start with Mississippi State.
What, you ranked them higher than Arkansas?
I like Mississippi State. This is just my view of how they are on Twitter.
All right.
They're very laid back. They're not negative toward their own school. They don't have a history of a lot of success in football especially, but they're not negative about it, and they don't brag. They're not bragging about any of that stuff. You know, they're just kind of saying, hey, we're hopeful. We think we'll be pretty good. This has happened. This has happened. Hey, maybe we'll be pretty good this year. They don't make predictions of winning the West or going to the championship game or whatever. They're just kind of low-key people. Now, Arkansas, I got to be honest, Razorback fans, they're really aggressive. If you start posting stuff that's incorrect, they will get all over you because they're very knowledgeable, and you cannot just post garbage on Twitter and expect somebody to accept it because they'll jump all over you. So I rate Razorback fans pretty good on Twitter for that reason. They're smart. They're plugged in. They know what's going on. And they don't post a lot of really stupid things on Twitter. They're also not running around making predictions about winning stuff all the time. So I'd rank them up pretty high, too. And then I don't know why I've got LSU down there. It was a
I think it's just
mistake.
a little, yeah, the graphics
mistake.
That's all right.
Georgia, I would rank number 3. Georgia, you know, here's the thing about Georgia. They're kind of new to this being really good in football. They were okay for a while, but they were dominated by Alabama. And then Kirby Smart comes in, and they've really gotten good. So they finally win the national championship. They're better than Alabama. I would expect a lot of bragging going on right now. A lot of, hey, you know,
yeah, you don't have
shut
Georgia
up.
fans in your DMs, do you? I do. So they're annoying.
So you think they're annoying, but I've not noticed any of that.
Ooh. I'll
See,
show
and
you
again,
some
I
of mine.
admit this is subjective. It's how I see it when I read Twitter. Now you may be right. I may not have enough of them on my feed, but those are the ones I would rank and how they would rank it just based on what I see when I read Twitter.
I think it's a pretty good list. I think it's a pretty good list. Well, our final question for you guys today is LR Tackett says, you've mentioned the factors that caused you to take a job covering Arkansas back in the 70s. Clearly, you think you made the right choice for a team to cover, but if not Arkansas, what other job would you have gone after? I'd say Texas Tech, since you're from the Lubbock area.
Now, you would be wrong about Texas Tech.
Well, Mike, I didn't say it.
Yeah,
LR Tackett.
talking about LR Tackett. He would be wrong. Look, I enjoyed growing up out there. I enjoyed going to Texas Tech games. I left there when I went off to college, and I haven't lived there since, and I would not move back there. So I never had any desire early in my career to go back to Lubbock. It's like kind of going backwards. Plus, I'll be honest with you, Texas Tech has a whole history of having bad ADs. They have bad ADs that make bad decisions, and if I had a job there, they'd run me off because I'd be after them all the time for mistakes that they make. So no, it would have never been Texas Tech. It's kind of tough to think about that. I do know that when that happened, I was working at a station in East Texas, and because I was the sports director, I could do whatever I wanted, and I arranged it where I could go cover the Cowboys, the Rangers, go to not that far to Dallas. I thought, hey, this might be fun, covering pro sports. Didn't like it at all. So after just 1 year of that, I'd pretty much decided, okay, where do I go in my career from here? I do not want to cover pro sports. I don't want to go to the Dallas market. I want to cover a good college program. I also decided that I didn't want to go somewhere where you're kind of covering a lot of teams, because it's hard to focus for me. I like focusing on one team. Maybe it's my ADD that I can't focus on a lot of teams at one time. But that's what I was looking for, a job where I could cover one team, be around one team's fan base, and kind of really get into what they were doing. And one of the schools I considered, it seems kind of goofy now, but I considered Baylor.
Really?
Because Waco's a small TV market. So if you're working for a television station in Waco, you're going to be covering Baylor. You're not going to be going up and covering the Cowboys and a bunch of other stuff. That's what goes on in that area, and so that's what your viewers are into. So it was at least somewhat attractive. OU is another place I considered, simply because as a kid I always liked OU, because OU fans hate Texas even more than Arkansas fans, and so I always identified with them. And plus, Norman, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma City in general is a little bit more out toward the west. It's kind of more like what I grew up around, and I probably would have eventually went, nah, it's too flat around here, not enough mountains and whatever. But that would have been maybe something I would have looked at. And then maybe at some point, because I hate bad weather, I might have thought about going to the Orlando market where I could cover the Gators, because it's, what do people say about Florida? Summer's horrible, right? It's hot, humid. I love that.
Yeah, it's nice though.
I'd love
all
it.
right.
And I would love the winter.
But you would have to cover UCF, you know that, right? You know, they claim they won a national championship. You'd have
what
to
other
cover
TV
them.
market can you cover the Gators from?
Gainesville.
They have their own TV?
They have their
then
own
I would
TV
go there.
market.
It's got to be a little dinky place.
It's a small market.
Yeah,
It's a
so you
small
probably
market.
make about like $10,000 a year, right?
Maybe less than that, maybe $5,000 a year if you're covering the Gators.
So all of that has made me realize, boy, I got lucky, because I did get the job and I did come up here and I stayed, it's really been the place for me.
Mike, we are so glad you're here. I'm glad that you
This
didn't
is
go
my
for any of those other options.
48th fall camp.
No way.
Believe that, 48.
You know, I think it was one of the reporters was joking with Pittman about how many fall camps it's been for him. 48 for you?
48th fall camp.
Well,
That's a lot of fall camps. They all run together in my mind now.
That is a lot of fall camps. And speaking of fall camp, I'm looking at the time. We got to head over to fall camp for today. So that is it for this week's edition of Ask Mike. We'll see you next Monday and answer more of your questions. See you then.